21st century is the century of superstar entrepreneurs. Every one of us can name at least half a dozen. Those names are household names worldwide. It is also the century of science. Before our eyes, an unprecedented global race unfolds for talent, breakthroughs, discoveries. Finally, and most urgently, is the century of ecological crisis. Many of us, with good reason, fear it could even become the century of ecological collapse. We all know successful business leaders, famous scientists, or influential environmental activists. But there's only one person on this planet who has built an organization that is at once a pioneer in business, in science, and in ecological conservation, making it one of the most relevant companies of this century. This guy is with us tonight. For him, it was just a couple of hours from the United States. For us, it is another defining moment. És ha megengedik, akkor néhány szót magyarul is szólnék. Szeretném külön köszönteni azt a közel 100 biológia tanárt szerte Magyarországról. Feleségem Anna édesanyjának, aki maga is biológia tanár. Juditnak a segítségével hívtunk meg külön erre az alkalomra, hogy legyen lehetőségük kérdezni, beszélgetni a vendégünkkel, és tamaszt őket a Brainbarra. Ladies and gentlemen, on the stage of Brainbar, the founder of Colossal Biosciences, Mr. Ben Lamm.
Good to see you.
Welcome.
So briefly, can you tell us a little bit about Colossal? Why did you start it? What are its aims? What do you want to do?
Well, I really think it's George Church's fault. So if people love it, you know, maybe they can give me a little credit, but if they hate it, they can blame George. But George had this vision to use synthetic biology to bring back extinct species, to inspire the next generation, help rebuild ecosystems, as well as apply all those technologies to conservation, and then some of them actually to human healthcare. So we kind of thought it was interesting to build a company that had the opportunity to inspire the next generation, create impact, and then also create a lot of value in the tech. So being an entrepreneur that had worked in software and satellites and a few other technology sectors, I really thought this was probably the best use of like my interest in ADD. And I thought I could do a lot of different context switching. So I thought it'd be an interesting project to pursue.
How long has it been?
So we're 4 years old next week.
Hey.
So next week we're 4. We've got a lot done. It feels like a century that we've been working on this thing, but we're only 4 years old.
Tell me about de-extinction, because I mean, since I discovered that you and I were going to be talking, I've been kind of asking myself a lot of questions like, what's the point of de-extinction when we're talking about species that became extinct through natural processes rather than being hunted into oblivion? Like, why?
Unfortunately, we're going to lose up to 50% of all biodiversity in the next 25 years. And so I don't see that modern conservation techniques moving at the speed of which we're eradicating species and changing the environment. So I really think that, you know, we need a de-extinction toolkit. I think it's generally better to have a de-extinction toolkit and not need it than not have it and absolutely need it. So our view is if we could build this de-extinction toolkit and build in a way where we can also use the core technologies like the building blocks and leverage that through our technology spinouts to make it subsidized for all conservation. This is not only the end-to-end system for de-extinction, but it's all the sum of the parts that we can then give to conservation. And over the last 3.5 years, since we started the Colossal Foundation, we've actually worked with 60 different conservation partners and enabled them to use these cutting-edge technologies to save existing species today. So it's really not just about the de-extinction aspects, but it's also taking the technologies from the journey and applying them to conservation.
So when we're talking about bringing back extinct species, is that what we're actually doing?
Yeah, we get this question a lot.
Yeah.
And so for us, you know, we're really more about rebuilding extinct species today. I think of us as a genome engineering company at our core. And so if you take away de-extinction, you take away species preservation, at our core, we're really focused on building a platform that can do a deep analysis from a computational biology perspective on life, and then engineer in directed evolution. And so for us, all the species that we work on, we're not trying to do trait engineering. We're not trying to make an approximation. Like when we bring back the dodo, the genes that drove the craniofacial morphology, the stature of the dodo, the flightness of the dodo, its kind of unique look, as well as its ecological function, all of those will be the core genes that made made the dodo that went extinct. None of those are approximations that we just kind of tried to do. And so for us, we think of it as, how can we leverage these tools from a rebuilding perspective versus a start from scratch and try to engineer from scratch.
Tell me about the species that are currently like in the pipeline or
So the species that we can talk about that are in the pipeline. We are exploring more, full disclosure, but the woolly mammoth was our flagship species that we announced. Our second species that we announced was the Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, which is, it's like think of it as like a zebra marsupial wolf. It's like the weirdest, coolest animal.
I've seen a picture of the last one.
The last one ironically was named Benjamin. And it died in the Hobart Zoo in 1936. So it's it's only 80 plus years extinct. It hasn't been extinct for 10,000 plus years. We've also been working on the dodo, which we made a huge announcement about this week, which we're pretty excited about. We had the biggest breakthrough to date for the dodo. And then this summer we announced the moa in partnership with the Ngāi Tahu Research Centre, which is part of the Maori people of New Zealand. And then obviously Sir Peter Jackson, who created Lord of the Rings. So those are our flagship species that are in process. Two other things that we announced this year. One was the woolly mice, which I was surprised at the global fanfare that it created. A lot of people were pretty excited about the traits that we engineered from a mammoth into a mouse to test some of the phenotypes and physical attributes. And then obviously our dire wolves created quite a stir. I think we were pretty excited at the feedback that we got globally on the direwolf resurrection, and I hope it bodes well for the work that we're doing for our other species.
There are 3 direwolves currently.
3 direwolves.
What are their names?
Khaleesi, because we had to give a shout out to George R. R. Martin and the team from Game of Thrones. We felt like people would be really pissed if we didn't do anything with Game of Thrones. Another one is Remus. He's the famous one because he's on the cover of Time. And then Romulus, who is the first one and who's actually the biggest.
Amazing. What got you here?
So my background is in working with much smarter women and men than me in technology sector. So I fundamentally like systems. So I like building system models, and de-extinction is a system model, right? Like we can't just do computational biology and be successful at bringing back a species. We can't just do the genetic restoration or the ancient DNA reassembly, and we can't just do the genetic engineering. We also have to solve things like surrogacy. So to build the system, it was a pretty interesting project, right? Because all of the technologies existed in some form or fashion, but it didn't have the right focus and funding. And so my thought process was I could bring all the top people in the world together, give them the support and mission that we needed to go achieve, and then help them solve the various kind of points along the system so that we can literally create this end-to-end pipeline that can be used for critically endangered species, recently extinct species, functionally extinct species like the northern white rhino, as well as species like the mammoth.
When you found a company like this, it starts with a really optimistic, hell yeah, let's do it vision.
We're still in that phase, by the way. We're still in the hell yeah phase.
I am so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But along the way, I'm sure you would have encountered certain things that you did not expect to encounter. Like, is this really something that I have to figure out? And I did not anticipate this. Tell me about the
So a couple of things that we figured out along the way was, I'll tell you the first one seemed like a pretty no-brainer. Right before we started the company, or before we launched the company, George Church and I were working on it, and a friend of mine reached out to me and said, hey, I want you to meet this guy, Matt James. Matt James is amazing. He's like one of the top elephant conservation group people in the world. He'd raise elephants in all these zoos. He'd help zoos actually build a captive breeding program to procreate more elephants. You definitely need to meet him. And I remember calling George Church and said, we should probably hire someone that has raised an elephant, right? If we're going to work on the mammoth, which I know sounds really stupid. We're just so busy thinking about all the genetics and whatnot. We hadn't really thought about that side yet because we weren't there. And so there's so many surprises like that have come around along the way. Most people think of us just in our labs. But, I'd say that's only about 50% of the work. 50% of the other work is like working with indigenous people groups and private landowners and governments, advocating for species preservation. Most people don't know this because it doesn't get quite the headline. But, we actually have more conservation projects going on than actually species de-extinction projects. And so there's so much outside of the lab, outside of quote unquote de-extinction, that occurs on a daily basis that we're constantly learning from. Another thing that came up that was pretty interesting was engagement. And so we had no no idea the level of engagement that we'd have from the public. And so we've actually already received 58,000 unique stories, non-syndicated, which is insane. 500 billion media impressions. And with all of that, especially in the US, if you get 50% of people behind you, you're doing something really right. But we got, it's very polarizing here or there at this time. But right now we have 95% positive or neutral feedback and 5% like super negative. But that's still like insane numbers, right? For anything that you're doing that's this big and bold. What's also interesting is some of the criticisms that we received, we were a little surprised on, right? Like when we made the direwolf, I thought people would say wolves are polarizing, wolves are predators, wolves are scary. You made a giant Pleistocene wolf. What did you do? We didn't get any of that. People just wanted to argue semantics over classification of speciation, right? And that was the 5%, right? And so it was really interesting to us. It was like, wait, this is the argument, and we got we made people even more frustrated because we said if you want to classify them differently than we do, that's okay.
Yeah.
And because we take a pretty like inclusive strategy at Colossal, and that also frustrated people, which is also surprising. I would think that if you say you have a right to your opinion, it would resonate well, but sometimes
no. I mean, some people just want to fight.
They just want to fight, right? It's like it's the X sitting on the couch X crowd. They just want to fight. But once again, I think they have the rights to do that, and so those were some of the lessons learned that we were really surprised about. We were surprised at the number of engagements. We were surprised at how positive it was.
How could that surprise you? I mean, that it captures everyone's imagination so much. Like, I'm sure some of you, maybe it's just me, I don't know, you're picturing yourself walking down the street and then like, oh, there's a woolly mammoth crossing the roads,
Well, I hope we never have that scenario. We've done a lot of really things.
I do a little bit.
We've done a lot of things wrong. If you're walking down the street and you see a mammoth crossing the road, I'm sure someone's yelling at me, arresting me. So I hope that state doesn't come. But I think that ultimately all of the positives that we're trying to do, whether it's the in education and inspiration for the next generation, whether it's the technology applications to human healthcare, or the subsidizing it and making it all available for free for conservation, we assume that 99% of the benefit is there, and probably there's still 1% of the negativity that you still have to manage, right, in terms of like really the rewilding aspects and the cultural aspect and whatnot. So we try to be really thoughtful on that. But I will say that even though we thought people would be engaged, the level of engagement that we've received has far surpassed anything that we expected.
I'm sure that a parallel that a lot of people draw, probably in this room as well, is with Jurassic Park.
We've never heard that. Yeah, that's new to us. I think that it's funny that when we started the business, we were concerned about that narrative, and we were concerned that, so we spent a lot of time talking about what we were going to go out with, what was the narrative, how we're going to do it. And we're like, okay, so we're just going to steer away from Jurassic Park. We're never going to mention it. It's not part of what we're going to do. And then on our first interview, George Church said, well, it's like Jurassic Park, and only these are like fluffy velociraptors. And our PR team was like, oh my God, what the hell did George, like we spent months saying, don't say this. And it's like the first interview.
Well, he was addressing the mammoth in the room.
Yeah, he definitely was. He definitely was. Our fluffy velociraptor, he called it. But what's interesting was, it didn't scare people. And one of the things that movie did so well is it explained to like everyone that's not a scientist that there's this thing called DNA that is like the blueprint for species, and we as humanity now have the ability to edit those letters that make up DNA. So one of those things over the time we've leaned into it. So fast forward 4 years, we're working with Universal and Gareth Edwards, and we're at the Universal Jurassic World premiere talking about the benefits of these technologies, the education of these technologies, and the application of them to conservation. And so we did come full circle on it. And I actually think the great thing about Jurassic Park is because it gave everyone this foundational knowledge base of genome engineering, people can start to understand it. Now we still get a lot of memes. So we still get a lot of memes and a lot of people quoting all the famous lines because that's their first reaction. But I think it at least starts a dialogue and allows us to have positive and negative conversations around the technologies and its use today.
A huge part of that movie and the philosophy behind it was the ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can, it doesn't mean you should.
Right.
What right do you have to do this? Blah, blah, blah. Why is what you're doing with de-extinction not reckless and irresponsible?
Well, I think that humanity is generally reckless and irresponsible. I think we're trying to put intentionality to the reckless side and try to undo some of the irresponsible side. I think that if you look at, global ecosystem collapse and loss of biodiversity, entire clades of the animal kingdom disappearing because of human caused climate change, overfishing, population, that's a form that we've been doing over time of just, of playing God and doing terrible things to this planet, which we're seeing the effects in so many industries around the world. And so I think that if we can apply kind of that reckless creativity and ingenuity of humanity into something that is that can be used for good, that you can subsidize and bring new money, new technologies to conservation, while also getting people excited about science again, and it not being for just this group of like academic elites, then I think those benefits far outweigh the negative, right? And so we're trying to be very, very thoughtful. Every species we work on, whether it's conservation or de-extinction, we go through a pretty rigorous process. We don't just wake up one day and say, oh, we should make dire wolves, right? Like we're very thoughtful in kind of the approach, and we go meet with governments, we meet with indigenous people groups, we meet with landowners. We do summits in different universities just to get feedback, and both positive and negative. And so we try to be very thoughtful in the approach to the species that we work on and the technologies. And then we've been trying to make it very clear that for every de-extinction event we have, we try to apply that immediately to multiple conservation outcomes so people have more hope. I was recently in Aspen, speaking at the Aspen Innovation Festival, and I listened to a talk that was absolutely devastating. What I found, what I was told was that because we're now in this 24-hour news cycle, that everyone's that the next generation is being preached nothing but doom and gloom. And you would think that, oh, that's going to inspire people. People are going to get up and change things. They're going to clean up the oceans, and they're going to stop polluting the planet. They're going to drive EV. They're going to do all these things. But what we found, and what the data shows, because I'm at my core, I'm a data guy, is that it's actually having the exact opposite effect on our youth. And so they feel like there's no hope. There's nothing exciting. There's nothing that they can actually do. So it's actually spurring them to less action, not more action. And so I think that if we are successful in our mission and we stay true to our ethics and values in both the de-extinction and conservation work, and we continue to be collaborative and transparent, hopefully we can give some hope to these things. It's never going to be as cost effective as saving a species as bringing back species as saving a species. But if we can bring awareness to some of these core issues around biodiversity and inspire scientists and kids to be scientists versus influencers, well, then I think that's a probably pretty good thing at the end of the day.
What does success look like for you then?
Ultimate success, I said this earlier, I asked a question earlier, but ultimate success for us is we want to make it so normalized, de-extinction, that, if you're in Tasmania and you see a Tasmanian tiger or thylacine, you just think it's another amazing animal, but it doesn't appear to be this like mythical creature to you, or this like, I got to grab my camera and get a blurry shot of it photo, because we've been successful at the de-extinction, we've been successful at the rewilding with all the collaboration with all these different groups and the genetic diversity. And so success for us really looks long-term about putting the animals back into their natural habitats with collaboration and just having them as a functioning part of the.
Regarding public perception, is that something that that is part of your success plan, or?
I think it's important to be inclusive in the public perception, answer questions, be transparent. Like, we raised a bunch of money. We could have just gone into a secret room and we got great investors and built a mammoth or any of these species and just been like, here we go, right? We've tried to be more clear about kind of like our mission and plan along the way. And I think that's really important for in a public engagement perspective. But also, if part of our mission is to inspire the next generation, we have to go where they are, right? And, sometimes I get shit for saying this, but, we're in the attention economy, and we as adults for our youth, and I've got a young son now, and like we will compete for him with TikTok and Instagram and the next social media platform that we haven't even thought of yet, and we'll be competing for the latest pop culture news, right? We're not going to be competing. Science is not competing for eyeballs with that next generation, and so I think that the public conversation for us is very, very important. Talks like this open exposure, like when we announce things, to be transparent about our things, and also pairing that with the pop culture nature of our business, hopefully leads to inspiration and excitement, right? Like it's okay for kids to think de-extinction's cool. They may not have to understand the ripple effect of EEHV and it killing elephants, right? But if they understand that we have a biodiversity crisis, but there's new tools and technologies, they're not going to dislike animals more. They're not going to want to not save animals more. They're going to be more engaged in the science, right? And then as they get educated and as they mature, hopefully they then apply that excitement to solving these hard challenges.
I think that's true because I mean, I certainly remember when I learned what extinction was. It was framed as, you know, this was a tragedy. This is a sad story. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I was just like, what the hell? You know, it's like, but then I guess what you're trying to do is, but that's not it's not necessarily the end of the story.
Right.
Like it's a comma. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not.
And sometimes we get feedback from people that say just transparently, and people are saying like, well, that's going to take away from saving species. And what we're, once again, going back to data, because I'm a data guy, we're just not seeing that with the data. Like we work with all the top elephant conservation groups. They're saying that their funding and awareness towards some of the critical challenges that they're facing is at an all-time high because of partnership with us, right? Because even though I get frustrated sometimes that only dodos and dire wolves and mammoths make headlines, and all of our conservation work is maybe like one sentence at the very end at most. But what we're seeing is even that one sentence is bringing awareness to this. Like when we brought back the dire wolves and we made 4 red wolves, which is the most critically endangered wolf in the entire world, and we invented a new type of cloning technology from a specific cell type that had never been done before. What we found was we were sad because there were not very many red wolf stories, but then when you actually look at the data, there was like over 7 billion media impressions on red wolves, and the week before and the weeks before on Google and all the Google search and all the algorithms we looked at was 0. So from 0 to 7 billion media impressions, was a huge jump, right? Even though it didn't feel like it because it felt like the dire wolves monopolized everything. So we are seeing that there is an excitement that the conservation narrative is getting through to the public because we're seeing it public support for some of these projects and funding that are conservation related that aren't our projects go up as a direct relation to when their projects are announced that are attached to de-extinction.
How do you choose which animals or which species you're curious about bringing back in terms of conservation or de-extinction? Like it can appear to be random.
Yeah, it can. But I promise you it's not. So we don't have a checklist. It's not like, okay, we have to meet these 5 criteria. But one of the things that we try to think about is, first of all, is it possible? Just speaking to your quote, which is also a Jurassic Park quote, doesn't mean we should do it if it's possible. But there's many cool projects that I wish we could work on that we can't because it's possible from a genome engineering perspective, but it's not possible from like a surrogacy perspective. Stellar sea cow probably being the best one out there for it. But interesting. On the matrix, we think about the cultural applications for an indigenous people group. So certain species like the moa are part of the Tonga of the Naitahu and the Maori people, right? And so for us to go work on that species without talking to them and getting their blessing and support, like, I mean, I feel like that's irresponsible.
That would be an aberration.
Yeah. I think it's massively irresponsible, right?
Yeah.
We did the same thing with wolves, right? And so we went and spoke to a lot of the large tribes in the United States and got their perspective on the dire wolves. Like, have you heard of this? Do you care about this? Does it impact you? Many of them told us that they believe that their ancestors would talk about the great wolf, which was this massive white wolf, that they believe those to be dire wolves. And they would tell us the dire wolves were white. I was like, well, some people think they're red. And it's like, no, they were white. And they tell us these stories. It turns out they're right as we got into the genetics over time. And so the cultural aspect's important. We also think about, like, are there ecological benefits? Are there conservation benefits? Public perception. We think about that, right? It's like, will there have an impact to the ecosystem? Another one is cultural. Like, one of the things that we were excited about with the dire wolf was most people, including many people that worked on Game of Thrones, thought that the dire wolves, not George R. R. Martin, he definitely knew what they were, though. I promise you. Like, he was actually very, very knowledgeable. He had been to the La Brea Tar Pits. He knew it all. But what's interesting is that many people just believe that they're like mythical creatures. And so we thought, wow, this is a really cool pop culture moment outside of all the ecological benefits. We could bring these awesome people in from this idea of fantasy and Game of Thrones. We could activate a community that was like fans of that into science, and we could bring them into the red wolf. We could talk about wolf conservation, and we saw exactly those results from that, which was pretty awesome. So it's like this three-dimensional model that we try to talk through in terms of like why bring back a species.
Well, you mentioned earlier the dodo with some big news coming out of Colossal, I think just yesterday.
Yeah.
Share your news.
Mammalian genome de-extinction work involves somatic cell nuclear transfer or cloning. What's interesting about birds is you can't access the nucleus in the developing egg in the developing bird, at least safely, or it's not detrimental to the animal. And so for us, we were going a different approach, which is what's called editing PGCs or primordial germ cells. These are the precursor to egg and sperm. And so for us, we will edit PGCs, primordial germ cells, that will become egg and sperm. We will insert those into genetically engineered sterile birds, in this case chickens. And then when those two chickens mate with these edited sperm and egg, the resulting egg will hatch and it'll be a dodo. So it sounds like science fiction and weird, but it's crazy. It's cool. But here's the problem. PGCs in birds, there's only 2 species that ever happened for: chicken, then 20 years later, geese. And so it's a pretty hard way to a model to actually build out the culture conditions and media to grow and sustain primordial germ cells, where there can also be, when they're put into a bird, actually migrate to the gonads or ovaries, right? So it's actually a pretty hard thing. It's only been done for 2 species. So it was the major blocking step for the dodo. All the computational biology work, having the genetically modified chickens for receiving, and all the editing work will take time, but all that could be done in process based on kind of the foundational platform we built. But creating PGCs, it was really hard. And so people were asking us, like, how long is it going to take a dodo? I was like, well, PGCs take us 20 years. It can be a while, right? And so we were lucky, and Anna and Beth and their incredible avian genomics team got to PGCs in 18 months, which is unbelievable.
That's like not as long as 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's much shorter, actually. I remember I'm a data guy. And so what's interesting, though, is I think that was made possible because Anna had worked in academia, Beth had worked in academia, much of her team worked in academia, but they didn't have the focus, they didn't have the funding. Grant comes in, they have to go do this. But being in an entrepreneurial landscape where they had one mission and they have autonomy in that, and entrepreneurial autonomy to work on knowing that they get to work on the tech tree for all the different all the different facets of the project to then get to the dodo, allowed them to really focus on the hardest problems first with the right level of financial support. And with that, they shortened something that happens in academia from 20 years to 18 months, which is amazing. So now that we've achieved that, I can't give you a date, but what I can tell you is we'll be able to give you a date probably in the next year.
What's the benefit of the dodo?
So a couple of things. It's not
sorry
dumb.
If there's any dodos in the room. I didn't mean to offend you, but
you'll have hate groups on that dodo thing, because I'm telling you, I would not go on X tonight. I think that so the dodo. So a couple of things. The dodo was the symbol of human-caused extinction, right or wrong. It's just become the symbol, right? Like dead as a dodo, all these phrases. But ultimately, it is a symbol of what humans have done to species. So undoing the sins of the past, I think, is a symbol of hope, which is pretty exciting. Number one. Number two is, if you go to Mauritius, it's on the Mauritian flag. It's on their money. It's a part of their culture, right? And so
symbolic, cultural.
Cultural or two. The third thing is ecological. And so sometimes there's direct ecological benefits, like when you put a large keystone herbivore or a predator back into the environment. But sometimes there's kind of these like halo effects. So the dodo did not go extinct because it was great to eat and people were just hungry, right? Some dodos got eaten, but for the most part, it went extinct because of invasive species introduced to Mauritius by the Dutch in the 1600s. And it's it's a flightless bird, so it doesn't lay its egg in trees. And so rats and monkeys and pigs would eat those eggs. So now we're working with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and the Mauritian government and others to actually go through and say, how do we clean up the surrounding islands of Mauritius, parts of Mauritius? How do we remove invasive species to be ready for dodo reintroduction, which won't only help the dodo thrive, but helps the other endemic life specifically to the region. So I don't think we can fully know the true impact of all of these species without a very thoughtful, stage-gated, managed care model for rewilding. But we know immediately that cleaning up the ecosystem is good for species that are there today outside of getting ready for dodo tomorrow.
Well, I'm glad you brought up not fully knowing the impact, because in my sort of layman estimation, I think you can be as careful as you want to be.
Yep.
But the ripple effect, the implicit effects of what you do, the unforeseen circumstances, how are you going to be able to contain the implications of what you do?
Well, the good news is rewilding doesn't work like a process where you just run around, make some animals, breed some animals, open the gates and cross your fingers and then go home, right? That's not how rewilding works. I think it's how some people are concerned that's how rewilding works. But it's a very stage-gated process with managed care. And so I was fortunate enough to rewild Ned, the 21st Tasmanian devil, back into mainland Tasmania. And Ned didn't have the facial tumor disease. So they've been breeding a population without this terrible facial tumor disease, rewilding them back in there. But even Ned and Ned's parents and Ned's parents' all lived in a managed care facility where they were going larger in terms of like increasing kind of the area under which the next generation could live within, right? And that's the same way that, you know, wolves and others have been successfully reintroduced. And so that process, so that you can measure the impact to the ecosystem in these different stages of release, is absolutely critical. And so interestingly enough, the science will move faster, which sounds crazy, than actually the rewilding programs themselves. That's why it's so critical for us to have rewilding groups in these committees in country today, to be ready for the species for tomorrow. So we don't get to dodos and then say, what's the impact of rewilding them, right? So we have to think through this and start building this model early.
One thing that made me curious and excited about having this discussion with you is, I mean, on a personal level, like, let's go back to your business background. You're what's known as a serial entrepreneur. You've started, grown tremendously, and sold companies, and it's a pretty standard practice. What makes me concerned here
is I'm going to bail.
Well,
you can say it nice.
Let's say that you do bail. How are we supposed to trust that once you sell, or if you sell Colossal, you're not just washing your hands off the responsibility?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. You know, and I think that, you know, what is the old finance model? Is like historic returns does not predict future returns. It's the same model here, right? And so, yes, I've built and sold businesses. And I think part of that is that many of them didn't have true impact. Like, they created value and they created great cultures and great returns for employees and investors and shareholders. But at the end of the day, like, the true impact was not measurable, as in the case of this. I made a joke about ADD earlier, but what's interesting about this is there's so much context switching and there's so much impact. I don't see myself ever doing anything else like this. And I think, you know, I have no intention of leaving Colossal. What's interesting about this model that scratches the entrepreneurial itch is we've spun out 3 businesses out of Colossal, 2 of which we've announced. They're doing quite well. And so I can have a meaningful impact on monetizational models that come from the technologies that we're doing in various industrial and human health care use cases, but it doesn't take away from my abilities to kind of be the steward of Colossal. I mean, selfishly, there's not another company I think that's as cool as ours. I think we are the coolest science company in the world. You know, sure, if some magical thing comes out that's cooler than this, I can't think of it. But if it does, and I have a desire to leave, I'm sure I'd put it in the right infrastructure and teams to do it. But I think that everyone that is, the way we hire at Colossal is very mission and conviction focused, not skill. Like, I think you can train any skill set, right? And I talked about this earlier in some interviews, that like AI and these progressive technologies are going to change where you don't need to be an expert in X, Y, and Z, but you need to be able to creative thinker, a, you know, first principles thinker, someone that can solve problems in very unique ways. And I think that's how we've hired and we built a foundation. If I was gone tomorrow, I think the company would continue on its values. And I think it would continue to deliver at the current,
and it's still ethically
with a complete ethical mindset, right? Like, we have this is insane. We have 95 scientific advisors, conservation advisors, and indigenous advisors across a couple different boards, and they have more power than our board of directors. And we've architected the company for that, right? And so, there is, I wouldn't say it's designed by committee, but we have a lot of people's voices at the table, right? And so it's a constant checks and balances, and we felt like that was so important from
because it is a shared responsibility. Because that's like a micro level what we as a planet are kind of left holding the bag with.
Exactly, 100%. And one of the things that I think that will be the truest testament to Colossal success isn't just maintaining kind of our ethical standards and frameworks, regardless of my position. Like I said, I have no intention of leaving. But at the same time, I think that the ramifications of its impact to excitement for kids and the next generation, as well as impacts to conservation today, I think will be the biggest measures. Like one of the things that doesn't get any headlines is our work on elephants and EEHV. If you don't know, EEHV is the #1 killer of elephants worldwide. It kills more than poaching, human-elephant conflict. About 20% of baby elephants die. So I can keep making it worse for you. It's pretty gruesome death too. But ultimately, that is something that's solvable with science. And so we worked with several partners, including Baylor College of Medicine. And I'm proud to say that within 2 years, we have vaccines that are in elephants right now. And it's conferring resistance to the #1 strain of EEHV that's been killing elephants, right? And so I think that the kind of echoes of eternity that we get from that is that if it continues to maintain and can confer resistance, and we do it for the other strains, and then we make that available for free, which we do to conservation, and then that inoculates elephants, well, that'll do more for elephant conservation than all elephant conservation ever.
Yeah. It's a very
statistically speaking.
It's a very noble thing, seriously. I think we're reaching the point now where I'd like to open up to audience questions. So if you have a question, I'm sure you've got some. Please raise your hand. We'll make ourselves known. Yes, we've got a woman in the second row here.
Aren't you scared that this amazing thing will backfire on your other purpose? Because illegal hunters maybe will think that why not shoot a lost animal because Ben will just come and do his magic, keeping in mind that cost effectiveness will not be in their mind because it's not coming out from their pocket.
Yeah, a couple things there. One is it's a great question, right? Like poaching's really bad, and I think that AI, drones, and there's a lot of people trying to tackle illegal wildlife trade, which is fantastic. But for us, I think that ultimately our goal is to rewild the species. So that means that we have to work with governments and whatnot, and not to be negative, but just to be able to project our values onto a society like Tasmania, or like there's a famous movie about hunting the last Tasmanian tiger, or like Mauritius. If these animals have a cultural or in some cases, in the case of like the Maori, or in case of the Aboriginal people for the Tasmanian tiger, have a connection to them, well then, if we're spending so much money in their creation, and you could say, well, that just creates more value, we are going to put those pressures on governments. So if you work in any of the governments that we're talking to that know what we're doing, just know we will put extremely hard pressures on you to protect these species, right? Because we're never going to get to successful rewilded species at the population densities we want for ecosystem transformation if people are hunting them. So we will put tremendous pressure on governments that want them back in their lands, right? Whether it's cultural or significant or whatnot. And so we do view that they bear some responsibility. We're taking the risk, we're taking the economic risk, we're doing a lot of stuff, but they have to play their part, right? Like the Australian government put bounties on the thylacine and eradicated the thylacine. They paid people to kill them. So it will be part of their responsibility to protect these species. And if they can't do it, they're not going to get them.
That's a great question. Yes, we've got a woman on the aisle over here.
What's the true value added of reviving a species that's been extinct for a while and the ecosystem has changed? So you have to do just the thing that you want to reverse, like somehow manage the ecosystem where you put it back, which is just a man-made interaction or intrusion, just the one that you want to, symbolically reverse. So how is this? What's the point in reviving a species that will not be able to live by itself in our current ecosystems?
So I think, once again, this is a non-persuasive is an educational moment, right? Like people sometimes say, well, you can't bring back the mammoths because I saw an ice age that their environment was nothing but was cold and whatnot, which actually isn't true. There are many interglacial periods during the late Pleistocene that were warmer than today. And so what we found is that we are doing we as not colossal, but we as the human race are doing geoengineering every single day and ecosystem modeling every single day, right? So we are making an active choice of humanity to do a active management of these environments. Our goal is not to put mammoths back into the Arctic tundra or thylacines back in Tasmania and then like feed them and habituate them to humans, right? Like that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to like cut the grass for them and make it all perfect for them, right? Like our goal is for them to preserve and provide an ecosystem service by their return, right? So it's part of the goal and part of the model. So we spend a lot of time doing ecological studies, impact studies. We have a study going on right now in Tasmania around predation and do animals like quolls and numbats and or quolls and wombats and others recognize the thylacine from a from a kind of a genetic legacy and history perspective and trauma perspective versus like, do they just see it versus like a cat? And so we're doing some pretty weird and interesting studies. And so for our goal is not to bring them back, put them in an area where the ecosystem can't support them. We're only putting them back in systems where the ecosystem can support them and that they will provide an ecological service. Now, to your other point, it will take time. It will take time to manage and release thylacines back into the wild. But we know that the absence of an apex predator in Tasmania has led to the rise of the facial tumor disease, which is a transmissible cancer in Tasmanian devils. And the Tasmanian devils are going extinct because we eradicated the thylacine. And we also have a larger issue on mezzanine level marsupials in that area because they've lost that keystone predator, because predators kill the young, the sick, and the weak, right? It is a survival of the fittest model. So we do have to do some ecosystem work, but we will do that in concert with the animals that we're doing, and it's a very measured, stage-gated process. Our goal is not to put them back in the wild where then we have to manage them or a country has to manage them. The goal is to systematically put them back in the wild, very similar to what happened with wolves in Yellowstone and bears in Europe and whatnot.
It's a great question. And way more eloquent than the way I put it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, we've got a gentleman
it's hard,
in the back wearing the hat.
Can you help me understand how your work might contribute to carbon storage and carbon removal?
Yes, it's a great question. And just to be completely blunt, this is something that different people have different views on, right? So even within Colossal, so we believe that great ideas can come from anywhere, bad ideas come from everywhere too, and not everyone has to agree. So if you ask George Church, right, my co-founder, he'll tell you and he'll give you the math. He's one of the smartest people on the planet, so he's hard to not listen to, that if you reintroduce this population of mammoths at this density, at these latitudes, it will increase carbon sequestration, methane suppression at these levels, right? And you have to get to those densities, right? And so there's no way we're going to do that unless we have artificial wombs, because you can't scale that many elephants to 10,000 plus elephants unless you're doing it, simultaneously through some type of, distributed matrix of ex utero development. You can't do it organically, purely organically. But then other people like Beth Schwer, our chief science officer, she'll tell you that the ecological impact of rewilding large megafauna cold tolerant megafauna back into the Arctic will lower temperatures and create the nitrogen oxygen cycling through defecation and spreading of dispersal of seeds and removals of trees and the proliferation of grasslands, which is about 7 times more carbon efficient. And she'll say it'll have a net positive benefit, but she will never tell you that it'll go as far as where George states, right? And so to that point, and to one of your questions earlier, we don't really know. We know that they're, like, I'd say pretty smart people on pretty far sides of the spectrum will argue that a ecosystem has the right herbivores, specifically in the north, or in cases like Africa with the savanna elephants, the forest elephants, that you will have a net positive impact. But that measurability won't be there, I don't think, at least until, because remember, I try to think of this about data, until we actually do it, right? But generally speaking, both sides will tell you you'll have a net positive gain, but it will be different. Now, some of the work that Sergey and Nikita have done in Pleistocene Park have shown they've lowered ground temperatures by 8 degrees, which is pretty awesome, right? by introducing cold tolerant grazing animals, right? But it's still been somewhat of a managed care to the other woman's question. It's been somewhat of a managed care model, so it hasn't been truly wild. So is it truly wild if you get those same densities in a non-managed care model? Will it still procreate and create the right migratory patterns? It's still unknown. So generally speaking, we can look at the climate modeling and talk about the positive benefits from ecosystem rewilding. But until we actually do it in a measured way, I don't think we can truly quantify it. Even though people on our advisory boards will give you a very broad spectrum of that quantification.
Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
So
Yes, we've got a gentleman over there. Yeah, keep your hand raised. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so first, thank you for increasing the breadth of possible experience through the extinction of species. So today we have de-extinction with Colossal. Tomorrow, will we have genesis with neo-speciation, creating new species? Is this a magical idea?
No, it's a great question. So what he means about neo-speciation is, in case you don't know, is like, as we, through a combination of like access to compute, AI, quantum, and genome engineering, which we're getting pretty proficient at, can we adapt species, or can we even engineer new species, right? And I think from a humanity perspective, the answer is both. I really do believe that. Should we? It's different questions, it's different ethical question. I don't have to answer that question, which is great. But I do think, well, no, I mean, I don't have to answer the question on creating new species because we're myopically focused on de-extinction and species preservation, right? So I get a good cop out on that one. But I do think that ultimately, to the point of like not true neo-speciation, but in terms of adaptation, the Northern Coal Project, I don't know if you've seen that project we're working on, doesn't get much credit because it's not the thylacine, but I'll explain it briefly. We, as humanity, not Colossal, introduced cane toads from South America into Northern Australia. When we did so, what likes to eat frogs? Things like quolls and other small marsupials, they did so, and in that process, they are vastly allergic to the cane toad toxin, right? The neurotoxin kills them, they die. So we have found, through doing analysis and deep computational biology, from everything from snakes to small mammals in South America that coexisted and co-evolved alongside the cane toad, that a single nucleotide change, so one letter change, confers a 5,000 times resistance. So we made fat-tailed dunarch, which is a carnivorous marsupial in the family of the quoll, which is because they're not endangered, more like a lab marsupial versus the quoll. And we found that it conferred 5,000 times resistance, and so that the cane toads could be eradicated by some super quolls, right? Now, should we do that? That's another ethical question. I would argue that if you look at the breeding rate of these like Jabba the Hutt type frogs or toads, you really can't get rid of them. I mean, they're moving at such speeds. And if we do not intervene, the northern quoll does not have 2 million years to co-evolve the cane toad toxic resistance. We either have to intervene by eradicating the cane toads or engineering in diversity that will allow for them to predate on those cane toads. So I would argue that it's a moral hazard argument, that if we don't do it, it's a moral hazard, versus like the conceptual idea of talking about it in a lab. Like if we spend time in academia just talking about it, they'll all be extinct before even a paper comes out of whether we should do it.
Hope that answers your question. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, we have a gentleman in the front row here.
You have mentioned that human healthcare can use this technology. Mammals is used in this case. So how about extinct humanoids? I mean, Neanderthal, in example. So where is the line
Great question.
where you draw it?
So Colossal does not work on anything that's human related. Many of the and I'll get to your Neanderthal type question here in a second. Any technology that we make that has an application to human healthcare, we spin out. We have different capital that comes in. We have different governance models, different ethics that comes in, right? Because arguably we're doing enough weird stuff. I don't need people thinking like, oh, well, some drug came out of, I don't want like people to think like Umbrella Corp, right? And so I don't want people to think, oh, they worked on this mammoth project, then all of a sudden they've come out with a hair loss drug, right? It's like, so I don't want them to think that, right? And so because we really want a separation of church and state in that. And so if there are applications to human healthcare, which we have seen, we've spun them out, different board of directors, different governance, different model, number one. Number two, we don't work also, just to take a step further where we draw the line, we don't work on non-human primates. So anything that falls into that category, it's just something we're not going to do. And so if you're a fan of Gigantopithecus, we ain't doing that one either. So
I'm sorry for everyone else who had a question. Thank you all so much for being such a kick-ass audience. Get it up for Ben Lamm, everybody.
thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much. That's great.